Welcome to the KTPF Reload Show. In case you're wondering what the Reload Show is about, if you haven't heard previous shows, these are the interviews that were conducted by good friends of mine, Steve and Sue Taggart, in the days of the KTPF radio show. Their own radio show ran for just over 4 years, broadcasting every week for over 3 hours. I joined them in the last 18 months of the show's run, but eventually the guys felt they'd just about had enough. It was a monumental effort to keep broadcasting every week for 3 hours. It was a wonderful show. But unfortunately they're no longer involved, and the shows have just sort of sat in the archives, so I thought it would be nice to bring them back to life and bring you the interviews that the guys conducted over those 4 years. They include some of the most interesting people within the world of the paranormal, and some not so well known, but still, nevertheless still very interesting. We even have 1 or 2 rather unusual shows, including a live seance and other things along those lines. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed tonight's show, and this is the KTPF Reload Show. Enjoy.
This program deals with themes of an adult nature and is intended for a mature audience. They've landed.
You're in the right place. Online, on the web, and on air. All over the world.
Talk radio.
You hear us, we hear you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the KTPF Community Talk Show. My name is Suzanne.
And I'm Steve.
And we're here keeping the paranormal friendly. So sit back with your favourite beverage whilst we bring you a relaxed show full of the supernatural, paranormal and other strange phenomena. Now on tonight's show we've got Gary Heseltine. He is well known in the field of UFO research. A married man with 2 beautiful adult daughters. Scunthorpe-born Gary worked as a detective in the British Transport Police for over 20 years and was involved in the London bombings inquiry as a specialist interviewer of first responding police officers. In January 2002, while still a serving police officer, he launched an unofficial national database for police officers reporting UFO sightings at www.prufospolicedatabase.co.uk. The founder and editor of UFO Truth magazine tells us about ufology, reported cases, credible witnesses, evidence evaluation and ET visitations, and other opinions that he has regarding ufology and how he got involved. So sit back and we'll be talking to him. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to contact Gary now.
I bet Gary doesn't say it's Pluto.
Let's contact Gary and see what he thinks, what he's got to tell us about ufology. And as I said, he is the founder and editor of the magazine.
Hello.
UK Truth magazine. Good evening, Gary.
Evening, Gary.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me onto your show.
That's fine, not a problem.
That's all right, you can go now.
Thank you for
Right,
giving
that's it. For a free evening.
Thank you for giving us your time. We've just been
No
talking.
problem. Checks in the post.
We've just been talking about. Did you see that about Pluto recently this week? The NASA flypast.
Yes, yep.
What do you think? Do you think it looks like Pluto on the planet, or was it a love heart, or do you think it's just pareidolia as normal?
It's hard to know what it is. I think they must have a lot more images than what they're releasing.
Yes.
Seem to be just drip feeding it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is fascinating, and what I always find fascinating when you hear NASA speak is that they say, oh, it's going to have this and that on the surface, and then actually when they get there, it's nothing like they expect. So that always falls to me like we really don't know what's going on, and as we explore the universe, we're really just touching the tip of an iceberg in our knowledge. We really are the ants in the playground, I think.
Yeah, okay. Right, listeners, don't forget, if you have any problems and you're not hearing him properly, let me know and I'll tweak the amp a bit more, and but hopefully you can hear him okay. As I said, welcome to the show, Gary, and what we'd like to do is, first of all, can you tell us about yourself and how you got involved in ufology?
Well, I'm now a retired police officer. Mm-hmm. I retired in March 2013 after a 24-year career with the British Transport Police, most of which was spent as a detective constable, working on murder, manslaughter, rape, that kind of thing. I was an advanced interviewer of suspects and witnesses. So that's my background. Previous to that, I spent 6 years in the RAF Police before joining the civilian police. I got into UFOs in the sense of I had a childhood sighting that stayed with me, but in the background for a long time. And then, cutting a long story short, in January 2002, I launched an unofficial national database for British police officers to record their UFO sightings. And I started with about 6 cases involving 10 British police officers, and now 13 years on I have over 550 cases involving around 1,050 British police officers, which is quite a lot.
I've got the first one.
Okay. Can I just ask, before Steve asked his first one, how did the force feel about your interest?
Initially it wasn't a problem, but as time went on, subtle little changes happened and pressures were brought to bear that kind of culminated in one of the reasons why I left the police early. I could have gone for another 6 years, but as an example, the straw that brought the camel's back, as it were, was that in 2009, when the Ministry of Defence suddenly closed its UFO reporting desk, I wrote to all the police forces in England and Wales of my own volition in an off-duty capacity, stating that I was an officer with the British Transport Police, stated that my hobby was UFOs and that I had this police database, and how were they going to record sightings that they were still going to have regardless of the MOD's decision. And basically, cutting a long story short, my own chief constable I'd wrote to as well, as a matter of courtesy. He apparently got a phone call from another chief constable, I don't know which force, who ridiculed him, who's this UFO nutter that you've got in your force. And because of that, he took a dim view, and then basically he then instigated my chief superintendent to instigate disciplinary hearings for bringing the force into disrepute. And cutting a long story short, 12 months later I got a 12-month written warning, even though it was a private letter saying who I was, what I was doing in a private capacity, asking for information. The reality is you can't beat a big organisation.
No.
But that 12-month written warning, where your job was potentially on the line all through that process, is very uncomfortable. And I thought, well, it's only going to be a matter of time before they trump up some kind of problem for me, and I end up getting sacked for some reason. So I chose to walk away.
Right, okay. So what would happen in the police force? What would happen if someone came in or phoned up and said that they'd seen a sighting? Would it be taken seriously, or and if so, is this still the case?
Well, what you've got to understand is from late, I think it was December 2009, the MOD closed its UFO reporting facility, which meant that for the previous 50 years, the usual procedure had been that if somebody rang in, called to the police station, the police officer who took the call would then ask them to complete or record details for an online form that would then be faxed, telexed in days of old, emailed in recent years to the Ministry of Defence, and it would be up to them whether they investigated it or not. Invariably they didn't. However, the reality is from 2009, no force is obliged to record any information on UFOs as far as I'm aware, although many still will do. And what I would say is that if a member of the public walked into a big police station, because most of the small, rural, tiny police stations have disappeared, and it nearly always is a big regional police station now, if they went in and went to the front desk, what should happen is that they should be treated sympathetically, and an incident log should be created, and an officer should be allocated to investigate if there is anything to investigate tangible wise.
Right.
If it comes into a control room, which is via a 999 or a 101 number or whatever, basically, again, everything in a control room is recorded audio-wise. Everything. So the way that the responder, the civilian at the other end picking up the line, that's all monitored. So they have to be seen to be professional, and they can't dismiss you and call you a fool. Perhaps in days of old when things were more rural and less automated. So I would say that if you rang into a police station, it should be recorded. However, what the police will say is, well, we've nobody to send it to. So what's the point in telling us in a roundabout way? And I think that's a real problem. And that has never been addressed since I wrote to the MOD. And I could foresee that every force was still going to get anywhere between 5 and 10 sightings a year per force. Well, there's 43 county forces in England and Wales, Scotland and Wales, so that's a lot of sightings. And what are they going to do with them? So it's a major problem, because I think the original reason why the MOD did it, far from the cost-cutting exercise that they said it was, at the time in 2009, UFO sightings, as compared in previous years, were at a very high levels, considerably so. And the MOD were getting bogged down in freedom of information requests. And I think that was the real reason they wanted to get rid of the problem, which is, if you know your history on UFOs, is not too dissimilar to the way the American US Air Force got rid of the Project Blue Book. They basically set it to a university that was trumped up, that it was always going to set to fail. The university, the Condon report came out, there was nothing to it, and that's it. Oh, well, there's no point in carrying on Blue Book anymore. I think it was a deliberate act to get people asking from asking questions.
Right, okay. So if you was to walk into the police station today, just let me clarify this. Yes, they would take notice, or no, they wouldn't, and would it be passed on to the MOD?
MOD, no.
Well, it won't go to the MOD, but certainly if you go to the front desk, everything in the front desk area is video recorded and audio recorded. So again, if you walk in all seriousness and say, I've just seen something and I'm really scared, a lot of people who've had sightings are absolutely shocked at what they've seen. Whether it turns out to be misidentification, doesn't matter. The point is they've perceived that they've had an experience, and they may well be traumatised. So if somebody walked in traumatised, looking like they've seen a ghost, then they should be dealt with very sympathetically. And what should happen is that they should be set aside, an officer should interview them, and a log should be raised. An incident log is created for virtually everything that either comes to the police station via the front desk or via a telephone call. And if not, there should be a question as to why not.
Right, okay. Steve, you got a question?
Yeah, I got one that's right at the start of anybody's investigation, really. We all know what people see is unreliable due to how they perceive things. How do we decide what is relevant or worth following up on?
Well, as in my experience as a police officer, you get perception difficulties in the sense of yes, for example, let's do it this way, and this is where the skeptics try to make hay, but it doesn't add up to scrutiny. In reality, you can have. Are you in a? Let's do it as an example now. Are you in a studio?
No.
No.
All right. Are you in a building that has windows?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. The windows outside are looking at what, a street?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Let's imagine. Now we hear a loud explosion. What are you going to do? You're automatically, as long as the windows haven't gone in, you're going to go to the window and look down and look. Are you not?
Yep.
So what you'll have then is everybody doing the same. If they're in that area, everybody will look, so they all become material witnesses to an event, whatever it is. Everybody will see parts of that event slightly differently. For example, you may think that it was an explosion by a red car. You, when you give your statement to the police, might say it's a green car. Somebody else down the road might say it's next to a lorry. Some people might say, I saw 4 people on the other side of the road. Other people will say, I saw 2. Other people will say, I saw a guy riding a bike. But the point is, and this is the real fact of perception, is they all see an incident. Parts of the description, their personal descriptions may vary wildly, but they won't be wrong about the actual incident. I hear an explosion, I went to the window. That will all be the same. So do you see what I mean? So when we look at evidence, for example, if again something happened outside your room wherever you are and there's a UFO there, everybody would go rushing to the window to look, and you've got then 50, 100 witnesses if it's in a built-up town. So they become witnesses and they should have their statements taken, and all essentially will say they saw something in the sky. The variations of size, shape, colours, etc. maybe vary a lot, but they'll all more or less say the same thing, that there was something in the sky. And that is what should be remembered. Because when people talk about perceptions, I always say, well, hang on a minute, how can you decry? First of all, you've got to look for number of witnesses. Best if you get what's called independent witnesses. That's people who don't know each other, but all viewing from different geographical vantage points. That's the best kind of scenario. Then what you have to do is work out in relation to a UFO sighting. All right, so people have seen something. What is it? What is it then boils down to how they describe the size, shape, movement, noise, etc. Well, if you have 6 people who don't know each other, viewing it from 4 or 5 different geographical vantage points, and they're saying it's a cigar shape and it's about 200 foot long, then they are looking at a cigar shape that's 200 foot long. Then you have to determine, what is that object? Can we explain that away in identifiable natural things? So you go through the list. Is it microlight, aircraft, helicopter? Well, there's no noise, it's silent, it's 200 foot long, there's no appendages, there's no sign of appendages, and then suddenly it shoots off in the blink of an eye, instant acceleration, and stops 2 miles away. Well, we can't do that. So what you have to do is, first of all, establish that something was in the sky, and then you've got to examine the data to see what was described and see if you can then pull anything from it. But if an object did that, then we are not looking at anything that we can do, stealth or otherwise.
Right. Okay. So what do you do then? You've got, you've got the reports, you've interviewed the witnesses, you've done all that. Where do you go from there?
Well, it would depend. If it's a multiple witness event, we have got a real problem in the UK now, because say I do a great investigation and I have 50 witnesses, I come up with a conclusion report based on all this. I think this is anomalous. It to me points to unknown technology in our airspace. Or what am I going to do with that? Well, literally, what can I do? I can publish it within the UFO community, which in terms of mainstream is underground, so not many people will see it. I can put a press release out to the mainstream media, and the odds are that they'll just totally ignore it like they usually do. So what do? You tell me what you do. There's not a lot you can do when the mainstream media don't give you a level playing field.
No, they have a bad habit of ridiculing people, don't they, when it comes to things like that?
Well, that is the historical problem, especially with UFOs, that's really carrying on from the 1950s, when the CIA put the Robertson panel together. They commissioned the Robertson panel of top scientists, and basically that panel quite openly said, we've got to strip the aura of flying saucers, and we've got to work with the media to dumb this subject down in the media. Now, you could argue they did that for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons. I think it was done because too many people were genuinely interested and they didn't want to give out the truth of what was going on.
Right, okay. Now, you started the Profos police database. Can I ask why you went down this road?
It's a long story, which I'll cut short. Suffice to say, having had a childhood sighting, that stayed with me, but then I went away, had a life, got married, had a couple of kids, was in the Air Force, joined the police, and it was kind of like in the background. And then I basically came across a magazine called UFO Magazine, which was a printed publication, and it was in W.H. Smith's on Leeds City Railway Station. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. From years ago, it was just like little white booklets, little A5 booklets. But this was a proper glossy printed magazine, and it was all done non-sensationalistic. It was done by a guy called Graham Birdsall, sadly not with us now, died in 2003 of a brain hemorrhage. But it was a great magazine, universally regarded across the world, UFO-wise, and it told things from pilot perspectives, air traffic controllers, and from me as a police officer, and by then a detective, I was always drawn to things that were evidential, what would stand up in a court of law. Well, if a pilot sees in broad daylight a UFO that's a structured object, and he chases after it, and he can't get anywhere near it, and the object's just playing games with him, and maybe it's confirmed on ground radar, airborne radar, perhaps other aircraft in the area, passenger aircraft, etc., which has happened many times, then, in my opinion, it should have been treated seriously. But because of this era of ridicule from the 1950s that's persisted until this day, then basically we're still having the same arguments that we had 60 years ago. We've not moved on because really the mainstream media are working subtly and unbeknownst to themselves, really, because it's not happening at low level. This comes from on high, that there's a policy to dumb this subject down. They don't consistently come to people like me who could take them to the top pilots, the astronauts, the cosmonauts, the air traffic controllers, and put forward the best 3% of cases. They don't do that. If you remember, or some of your audience may remember, I made 2 appearances on This Morning, ITV breakfast, big show in the morning.
Yeah.
And basically, I challenged them to have a debate. Well, they had this guy called Chris French, who is a well-known skeptic psychologist on there.
Yeah.
And it was a real joke. And they tried to literally tie my hands behind my back. But I did a few things that surprised people. I like, especially with a live audience, because they can't control live TV. And somebody like me is relatively dangerous because I can tell the truth and will tell the truth. Now, unfortunately, at the end of the show, both the presenters, Holly Willoughby and the other guy, came to me and said, we should have you on every week. And I said, well, I'd be more than happy to come on and tell you the best cases, because I'll only feature the best cases.
Yeah.
But here's a story. They won't have me back on. And only recently, a freelance journalist about 10 days ago rang me up saying they're looking to do a programme on UFOs on This Morning. I think it was on last week or the week before. And I said, well, let's see if you can just get me back on there, because I've done it a couple of times. Oh, no, we can't have you. Well, why not? Oh, you've been on it before. Well, that's ridiculous. Chris French has done it 20 times, and he gets paid £500 a time. So that argument didn't add up. So the reality is the mainstream control the subject in the way it's perceived to the masses. If somebody gave me a TV series on the mainstream and just concentrated on the top 3% of cases, by the end of that series, no one with a sound mind who looked at the show with an open mind would be in any doubt that we're dealing with something very, very profoundly strange, and almost certainly is ET in origin.
Right. Well,
can I just at this point say more to our listeners than yourself, because you obviously know, UFO means just that. Unidentified flying object. It doesn't,
Absolutely.
It doesn't,
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean aliens coming from another planet, which is, unfortunately, is what a lot of people jump to straight away, don't they?
Yes, they do. And a lot of people would prefer that the term UAP is used, but I personally like the UFO because I know what it means. And yes, people do misinterpret. But the reality is, and the general rule of thumb is that 95% of all reports turn out to have a mundane explanation, whether it be misidentification, meteorological, whatever. That's fine. And then you have this hardcore of 5%. Now, when you really drill down into this 5%, you can take away another 2% that after investigation turn out to have a conventional explanation. But you are always left with this very hardcore of cases. Now, that's 3% of millions. This isn't 3% of 10. This is 3% of millions of cases worldwide. So we're talking about many, many thousands, tens of thousands of high-quality reports from all around the world that defy explanation after investigation. Now, if you were an investigative reporter for any other subject, you would go to the best evidence as part of your start point of an investigation. Well, why is it that in the mainstream we're still looking at the same silly stories, they're still doing the same silly shows for donkey's years? The format never changes. The first 20 minutes they give you a good pilot case and the audience is going, this is very interesting. Then the second 20 minutes they start to go into the iconography, or the alien heads, the comedian, the alien grey face, the people that stand on the top of the hills going ummy with tin lids on their head, and they make us look crazy. Now, if you were an investigator reporter for any other subject, you would start at only the best percent, the best top evidence. And in my case, what I would say is that the mainstream media do not do this. They continually fail to do this worldwide, apart from South America, which are far more open to the subject. And basically, the start point should be only at the beginning of the 3%. Why am I'm not bothered about the 97% that can be explained. We should be starting and telling the public about the 3%, and that's where your investigation starts.
Okay. Now, do you believe that UFOs are extraterrestrial vehicles, or are they drone-like objects scouting, or is there another explanation for the phenomena?
Well, it's two questions in one, really, because if it's a drone scouting, then you're implying that it's aliens that are sending them out as drones.
Okay.
Well, not really.
Right, okay.
It could be government
the honest
doing
answer is yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do believe that a small proportion of cases, 3% of cases, do, for me, create the circumstantial pass the circumstantial evidence test, which is used in court of law all the time. People get convicted of murder without the body sometimes because the prosecution put forward what's called the circumstantial evidence case. And that basically means is that if you've got enough pieces of the jigsaw of the story, you can create an overwhelming, compelling view of what's really occurred. Well, if you apply that test to UFOs and you look at the very top 3%, the pilots, commercial and military, astronauts, cosmonauts who've gone on the record, radar operators, air traffic controllers, observer corps, sonar operators, top military officials, scientists who've gone on the record. If you put in that hard cluster the very best cases, they do stand up to scrutiny, and for me, overwhelmingly, it points to ET surveilling the Earth. Quite what they're doing is another question, but are they here? Absolutely.
Right, okay. And why are we seeing these UFOs? Do you think that they have shielding devices so that we cannot detect them in our fly zone, but people can see them? Or is it the government that are actually denying everything that we're being visited?
Well, two questions there. The first part is I do believe that one of the characteristics of a UFO, a genuine UFO, i.e. ET, is the ability to render themselves invisible and visible at will, cloaking for want of a better word. But this is kind of evidenced by many people around the world who recorded footage, and this is not CGI footage, where people are seeing objects often in the infrared spectrum that you can't see visually, but through night vision and infrared lenses, you can pick up objects that you can't see visually. I myself are doing experiments with night vision and infrared at the moment in broad daylight and picking up objects long distance, but I'm picking up objects in broad daylight that you can't see visually, but you can see through an infrared lens attached to the camera. So the night vision itself uses a different spectrum, but they're clearly showing objects that are moving in the sky with night vision equipment that are making weird and wonderful manoeuvres that we can't do, right angle turns, reversals, instant acceleration, instant stop, what's called flaring up, where the object is bright and then suddenly it grows 10 times the size, like flaring up like a flare, and then goes down. but these are seen often for many minutes. So you often have multiple objects caught on night vision in weird and wonderful patterns that are not birds, clearly not birds, that hold formation. So there's a whole plethora of really good stuff out there. So they do have the ability to be invisible if they want. I think most of the time they are just like they're surveillors and just watchers. I think we have to climb down a little bit and think of ourselves as the ant on the ground in the playground. Would we talk to an ant? No, we wouldn't. Why? Because we think, well, we've got superior intellect. You're tiny, you're an ant. There's no point, you can't understand us. Yeah. Well, how do we know that aliens don't look at us as very primitive life forms? Just because we think that we're clever and we can fly jet aircraft at 1,000 miles an hour doesn't mean that they think that. And obviously they've travelled long distances. So it's a perception thing. So the reality is that I think we are being watched most of the time by probably many species who come and view the Earth much like we would swim with the fish in the Great Barrier Reef. We don't go break the coral on the Great Barrier Reef. That's a big no-no because that's the natural habitat. We basically just watch the variety of fish and observe in their natural environment. Well, how do we know that the vast majority of UFOs and aliens that are visiting here aren't doing the same?
It's alien technology has been rumoured to have been back engineered by our scientists and military. But what are your thoughts on such a potential earth-shattering claims, and why do you think these advancements have not been more forthcoming by the powers that be?
Is there reverse engineering? The reality is you've got to look at this subject from two perspectives. And I say this to many people. There is the secret world of intelligence services and governments, and me or you, will never have what's called the need to know. We will never have the authorization to find out those critical questions. So we're reliant upon what happens in the public domain. The reality is, though, that if something crashed at Roswell, and I sincerely do believe that something did crash at Roswell, naturally we would try to make whatever was recovered, if it was a flying saucer, for want of a better word, we would want to try to make it work. Why? Because if we did, our technological development would leap forward hundreds, if not thousands of years very quickly. And as we live in a world of militarism, and America, if you think about this, just won the Second World War. UFOs begin to turn up after we start detonating atomic weapons. That's no coincidence in my eye. There's a crash at Roswell. Now people lose this fact that people go, well, why Roswell in little New Mexico, middle of nowhere? Why would they turn up there? Well, the obvious answer is, and it's never really publicised that much, is that Roswell just happened to have the only world's atomic bomb squadron. Well, if you think about the big globe, if you've got a big rotating globe in your room and you were to throw a dart at it, what's the odds that UFO is going to turn up at that one little tiny place? Pretty slim. So to my mind, there's a definite correlation between atomic weapons and UFOs and them turning up. I think that when the first atomic weapon went off, it sent a sound wave into space that said, oh, this planet has suddenly got to a level of engineering and expertise that we didn't expect. And that's why they start turning up in larger numbers. So the reality is that I think there's many good reasons to think that we would have, if we've recovered anything, we would try to naturally make it work. How would you do that? Well, what's believed to have happened is that they take pieces from the craft and they go to the top corporations and say, try to make that piece work. They don't tell the other companies what they're doing, so it's compartmentalized, and each person, each company works in isolation, sworn to secrecy, and eventually one or two of them might go, yeah, well, actually we got that to work. And that's how things would have been done, and I think that's entirely feasible and almost certainly has happened. Have we got reverse engineered man-made UFOs? I suspect that we do. People talk about the TR-3B and things like that. I suspect there are some man-made UFOs, but where I disagree with a lot of people is I don't think that they explain the many sightings worldwide. I still think those are ET, but I think we have developed levels of technology, whether it's in association with or just through reverse engineering, UFOs. So I think it's logical that we would have reversed if we could, if something had genuinely crashed, and we do it because America certainly would want to be the top military power in the world, which they think they are.
Right, okay. We've got a question for you in the chat room.
Yes, Ghost Rider actually come up with the question. You've actually answered part of it, but he said, do you think some UFOs could be aircraft from the future or back in time, just crossing over somehow?
Well, what I've realised over the years is that there's no simple answer to that question. Whilst I am very much an evidential person because of my police background, detective background, I kind of look at the nuts and bolts. However, that's only a part of it. And I think study as over many, many decades now makes us realise that we're dealing with possible interdimensions. And you think of the Large Hadron Collider. Only in recent years do they admit that there might be 10 dimensions, 12 dimensions. Well, this is absolutely earth-shattering kind of technology that we're just becoming aware of. That's why I say we're in our infancy. I think we're just beginning to get to a technological level where it won't be long. I think within the next 15 to 17 years, and I say that because 2 years ago, mainstream science heavily reported that the new radio telescopes coming online worldwide, they were saying within 20 years we'll get detect an intelligent signal, not just a signal, an intelligent civilization through mainstream. So if you set that as taking the clock running, by 2033 we will have made contact even in the mainstream by 2033. But what I suggest what will happen is in the 5 to 10 years preceding that, and as each new development comes along and discovery comes along, mainstream science and television and the media are going to think, well, actually, it's only going to be a matter of time now before we've got to deal with the ET issue once and for all. And perhaps all the ufologists out there, maybe there is something to this, because within a few years we're going to meet these people or at least have contact with them. So I think there will be a sea change in the years running up to that, which some people may call disclosure, but I think that once something within a few years, within 5 to 10 years, there will be a breakthrough, and I think the real truth will start to come out.
Yeah. How far do you think mainstream is behind the secret stuff?
Well, certainly in aircraft, and I've always had a big interest in aircraft development, the general rule is that, like with people who use the stealth argument, and undoubtedly stealth aircraft have been responsible for a lot of UFO sightings over the years. But the reality is it's generally 20 to 30 years of secret development before it goes public. For example, the F-117, the stealth fighter, I think was first flew in 1975, but it didn't actually go public to the world until the Gulf War, which was 1991. So they knew had like a 15-year, 16-year gap, and I think that's probably 20 years. But this is an argument that doesn't add up to me, the stealth argument, because stealth does not operate anything like what we experience with genuine UFO sightings. What I mean by genuine UFO sightings, over the last 70 years of research, you basically can say that this about a genuine UFO, i.e. ET, that they have the ability to make instant acceleration, instant stop, reversals, instant reversal in flight, so you go forward and then back on the same track, 90-degree right angle turns, the ability to make high-speed vertical jumps, so 10,000 feet in a matter of a couple of seconds, in the blink of an eye, straight up in the sky. Similarly, they can do descent at high speed, 10,000 feet in a couple of seconds, straight down to the ground. They have the ability to render themselves visible and invisible, and generally, most of the time, there is no noise whatsoever, even at close quarter. So those are the general characteristics of what I would call genuine ET craft. Well, when you look at stealth aircraft, what do? They have a runway. They take off on wheels. They have wings. However funny shape they are, they still have wings. They generally have a tail configuration of some kind. And basically, stealth just means it's hard on radar to pick them up. They still fly like a plane. They can't stop in midair. They can't move at slow speeds, as a lot of people have said. In fact, I was watching a documentary today, and a top aviation official said a stealth aircraft, like a B-2 or whatever, they would stall at slow speed and drop out the sky because they need thrust to keep going. Well, genuine UFOs don't do that. They don't just accelerate like a car and get faster and faster. They just go bang, bang, gone, stop, gone, stop.
Yeah,
we can't do anything like that.
I suppose the closest we had to that was the old Harrier, which we've now mothballed.
Yeah, but have you ever stood next to a Harrier? You'd know about it.
Bloody noisy.
What happens? Well, absolutely. And it's like a helicopter. They still make loads of noise. So when people are saying that we're looking at huge triangular objects just above treetop level that are making no noise, the size of a football pitch, and you've got multiple witnesses, then I think we have to start listening to these people, because a lot of the police officers that have come to me over the years are reporting exactly that. One such case, an officer said to me, I was with my uniformed colleague and we saw a huge black triangular object, no noise, at about 50 feet height, and it was the size of 3 football fields. And I says, 3 football fields? Come on, how do you know it's the size of 3 football fields? And he says, because we saw it above 3 football fields. And I says, that's a good answer. And that's called validation in terms of police officer. When somebody says to you, you bounce it back. Yeah, it happened at 10 o'clock. How do you know it was 10 o'clock? Yeah, because Coronation Street had just gone off at 10 o'clock and I went to make a cup of tea. And that's validation through questioning. And so when somebody came out and says that to you, it was above 3 football fields, then we really should be listening to these people. But unfortunately, the mainstream are not interested. And I think that is very much down to certain governments. America, the most secretive government in the world on UFOs, closely followed by Britain, because of our special inverted fingers relationship that we've had all these years. We very much toe the line with America. But if you went to South America, like I've spoken in Brazil, you have thousands of people interested who will queue up for conferences, and you will have representatives of the military. A.J. Javan in Brazil and his team of researchers actually sit down at ministerial level with the Brazilian defense minister and the top people in the Brazilian Air Force to talk about and discuss the release of cases. Well, that doesn't exist really anywhere else in the country, but you've had official reports by the likes of Chile, Peru, Uruguay, Mexico. Completely different attitude. Many of those countries would openly say our air forces have studied them, and they basically conclude they're not stealth, we're looking at ET.
Okay. Talking about that, Mozzie's in the chat room, and he said, what are your views on alien races? Do you believe in any, and if so, which ones?
Well, yes, if I believe that UFOs are visiting and engaging with planet Earth, there must be something inside them. I personally have never met an alien, had any contact. I'm not an abductee, I've never had an experience, but I know many people who are. I know many researchers who investigate those claims. Whilst some people, I think, are drawn to the abduction phenomena because they want to be included and may have some psychological issues, the vast majority of people that do so are genuine. They've had an experience. And there are so many commonalities all around the world. And I know some of the top researchers. Dave Hodrian, who runs the Birmingham UFO group, I would regard him as Britain's leading abduction researcher. He's investigated something like 150 cases in Britain and from around the world over the last 5 or 6 years. And when you hear his presentations, there are so many commonalities. Mary Rodwell, ex of Leeds, now lives in Australia. She's one of the most prominent people dealing with the abduction experience worldwide. In Australia, she tours around the world. And basically, there are again so many commonalities to the abduction experience. How can it be that people in the third world who don't have access to the media, TV, radio, newspapers, etc., are more or less reporting the same kind of thing, that they have an experience, they have what's called missing time, a number of minutes disappear, hours, minutes, they find themselves in a room being experimented on by small creatures, not always small creatures. There are many different species allegedly out there, but this is not my personal area, because I see my personal area of ufology is trying to bring to the outside world the best credible evidence. If you were to go down the high street with a microphone and say, have a listen to this pilot report about UFOs, they'd be interested because they can associate with the pilot. But if you said to somebody, well, do you believe in alien implants, people are just going to laugh at you and say you're a nutter, because there's too much information and it's too far off the credibility scale. So I come at it from a very evidential basis, radar, ground trace elements that are recorded, indentations on the ground, things that can be physical, that something landed there, etc. And that's my sphere of ufology, as it were. But yes, I'm asked this all the time, but it's not my expertise, and I leave it to people like Dave Odrin, Mary Rodwell, to do those kind of things.
Okay. Now, as an experienced investigator, and on the evidence available, do you find Roswell and Rendlesham credible, and why choose those locations?
Well, I think I've answered that earlier, because the why did Roswell happen? Like I say, get your globe, get a dartboard, and throw it at the globe. And I tell you what, you won't hit anywhere near Roswell. But that's what happened in 1947, in July 1947. And why Roswell, New Mexico? Because it was the first atomic bomb squadron. And where was it? In Roswell, New Mexico. What a coincidence, middle of nowhere. So there's a different correlation there as to why UFOs turned up there.
Right.
So I think that answers that one. Rendlesham Forest, Roswell I do believe was ET related. There's far too many people gone on the record. The US Air Force lied repeatedly and tried to play it down, and even when they did two explanations in the late 90s, each one didn't stand up to scrutiny, i.e. the weather balloon and the crash test dummies explanations were found to not add up. So I don't think that at all. I think the US Air Force have pretty much lied throughout all of this, and especially if you investigate Project Blue Book, they paid lip service to it apart from the very early years, sort of 47 to 49, what was called Project Sign, which then became Project Grudge, which then became Project Blue Book. Project Sign was the most investigative period of genuine research into the subject, and in the first year, after a 12-month investigation, they came up with what's called the estimate of the situation, and that was a report that went to General Vandenberg, and it basically said, when we concluded looking at about 1,000, 1,200 cases over the preceding year, we think that this is almost certainly interplanetary. Now, that was the term in the 40s, not extraterrestrial as we'd use now. Interplanetary was the phrase of the day, but it meant the same thing. Vandenberg says, I ain't taking this to the president, and basically ordered all copies to be destroyed. How do we know it exists? Because a guy who wrote a very famous book called The Report on Unidentified Flying Saucers in 1956 was a guy called Captain Edward Ruppelt, and he ran Project Blue Book for a couple of years in the early 50s, and he said that he saw a copy. So one copy of that report did exist, and he went public in his book, and it's a very famous book. So we know it existed, and we know that it concluded interplanetary, and it was knocked back. I think there's maybe good reasons why governments have kept quiet about it, because let's for example, America likes to think that it's the most biggest superpower with huge influence all around the world, with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people worldwide, Americans being involved in the armament industries. supporting lots of jobs and families, etc., etc. Well, would it be wise for Barack Obama to stand up on the White House lawn and say, well, actually, we've known about these things for 60, 70 years. We can't get anywhere near them. We're actually totally vulnerable to them. Our technology is far inferior to theirs. Is he going to do that? Because all those armament contracts from around the world supporting thousands of jobs would not be then worth the paper they're written on. So that's one of the reasons why people at very high level don't come forward, because they don't want to admit that actually these things can come and go with impunity, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Okay. Steve?
Yeah, when it comes to Rendlesham, Colonel Holt's evidence should be the most believable, considering the tape and the notebook. But he seems to have changed and added to his original evidence over the years, and yet Larry Warren has fiercely stuck by what he says happened on that night. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's if anybody has noted the UFO Truth magazine Facebook page or my Facebook page, I put a statement about the forthcoming Colonel Holt lecture at Woodbridge, which was like 10 days ago now, and basically I said that I'd ended my association with Colonel Holt after 7 years of working with him to develop a film script, a viable film script, which I was writing in collaboration with him, because of his attitude and the way he treated Larry Warren. I think he's left himself wide open for legal redress. Larry Warren is a friend of mine. I regarded Holt as a friend of mine, but I could not stand by and let him berate somebody who I actually believe was involved. And what you must understand is that Larry Warren was the original whistleblower, who was in the public domain for 10 years, alone, totally alone in the world, talking about Rendlesham Forest in the public domain to the press for 10 years before any of the new principal witnesses like Holt, Penniston, John Burroughs came out, etc. Now, did he make mistakes? Larry did make mistakes, but why did he make mistakes? Because he was 19 when he got involved in what was a very bizarre set of events. Now, where I take issue is that Colonel Holt, as the senior officer who saw multiple UFOs himself and has recorded great evidence with the Holt Memorandum as a piece of documentary written evidence. The tape is a piece of physical evidence that you can produce in a court of law. That's all well and good. But in reality, far from bringing witnesses and encouraging witnesses to come out of the woodwork, it seems to me that he is actually causing people not to come forward. Because people just see the infighting that's going on. And that for me, is wrong. That policy is wrong. And why he has got a real downer on Larry Warren, he said to me that he's got lots of evidence against Larry Warren. So I said, well, if you've got evidence, put it out there. And the evidence will fall where it falls. But he never does. And again, having heard his lecture and seen the video, he makes terrible accusations without presenting a shred of evidence to back them up. And I think he's left himself open to legal redress, and I find that very disappointing. Okay. But the Rendlesham Forest case is great. He adds to it in the sense that at that Woodbridge, he mentioned that he got statements from radar operators. Well, I think the reality is he didn't get the statements, that it was Robert Hastings, the researcher who wrote the book UFOs and Nukes, who identified and got to the radar operators. They're in that book. So you can get that, and it's very good statements that have come out, and that's very interesting because it confirms very definitely that there was a UFO recorded on radar and seen visually by these radar operators over the base at the time of the incidents. So that's a different department. It's not just one department. It's now branched over into a different section of the Air Force, i.e. air traffic control. Yeah. So that's a major step forward. Gary, so evidentially things are still coming out.
Yeah, Gary, can I interrupt you for a second there? Is that radar operation, is that on both nights or just one?
Sorry, say that again?
The evidence from the radar people, is that on both nights or just one? Because it was over 2 nights, wasn't it?
As my understanding goes, and I've emailed one of them to try to get him to come forward more publicly, but he basically only went public for the book, but their names are in there, their statements are in there. They are kind of shy because they don't want this media circus around them, and you can't really blame anybody for that, because their lives would never be the same if they go on TV, etc. In the same way that Holt, when I first met Holt in 2007, I said, "You've had a fantastic career." I said, "But when you die, you're not going to be remembered for your military career. You're going to you'll be remembered for one thing, and that's Rendlesham Forest." So you have to kind of get to grips with that. And so it's his life changed considerably when, in a sense, it came out in 1983 as a result of Larry Warren's actions. That's what's led, and he always misinterprets that. But as my understanding, that was not the sequence of events. It was Larry Warren that got the document. That led to the document, the Holt memo, coming out through Larry Fawcett. But basically, when you look at the case, it still stands up to scrutiny. Even if you take all the personalities out of it, you have 3 successive nights. It's definitely a nuclear base, which he won't say, but it definitely is, because I worked on 2 nuclear bases, one of which was identical in its geographical layout at RAF Larbrook in what was then West Germany, between 83 and 85, or 85 to 88. I worked there, and basically Larry Warren has said it's nuclear, and basically you can tell straight away that it's a nuclear bunkers, weapon storage area. The Americans call it a weapon storage area. That means nuclear bunkers. A conventional bomb dump does not have security police, excess of 30 to 40 per night, 24 hours a day, 5 different shifts, working all around the clock. You don't get that with a conventional bomb dump. So straight away they're guarding something in the bunkers. That's what I did, and it was similar figures. And Larry Warren is the only one to say it's nuclear weapons. The others stick to this stock phrase of, I can neither confirm or deny, which is Nick Pope's favourite line in this. But realistically, they're all playing politics. The reality is they won't say it for one very simple reason. I know for a fact, and I was told this, and I can leave you to work this out, who told me, I can tell you for a fact that there were more nuclear weapons in the Bentwaters Woodbridge storage area than anywhere else in Europe. And the real answer why it never comes out to that effect is because it broke all the international nuclear arms treaties, because everybody thought that the nuclear weapons were at Greenham Common. Do you remember years gone by there was the peace campaign protesting everywhere about cruise missiles going into Greenham Common, which wasn't a million miles away, and all the time people were laughing at Bentwaters and Woodbridge because the nuclear weapons were there, and there were more nuclear weapons there than anywhere else in Europe. Broke all the agreements. Now that is then a major political dynamite question, and that's why the higher echelons witnesses do not come out. But that's the reality. This is about nuclear weapons, and this is what's often missed when you get TV companies, mainstream TV companies, making a documentary. They don't show you all the evidence, they show you a bit of the evidence. They don't show you the most telling parts of it. They don't show you that radar evidence that's been out for the last 4 or 5 years at least. But nobody's made a documentary on that and bring that extra to it. People are still talking about the lighthouse when it was never a lighthouse. How can a lighthouse stop above Holt at 1,000 feet and shine a beam down to his ground, which he and his colleagues saw? How can a flying lighthouse do that? It's ridiculous. But every mainstream documentary still goes on about it. Every newspaper still goes on about it. It's an absolute joke. So when people talk about Rendlesham, they're not getting the best evidence. If I did a documentary about Rendlesham Forest, the lighthouse wouldn't appear anywhere in it, or if it did, it would be kicked out in the first minute because it didn't stand up to scrutiny. And you get people like Dr. David Clarke coming out and saying, oh, you listened to the tape that he made. Oh, he says, yes, it's there. And 5 seconds, yes, it is. The reality is he was out there for 4.5 hours. I defy anybody to look at a field and go, oh, there's a light over there.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a light over there. Oh, there's a light over there every 5 seconds without going, well, that light's every 5 seconds. I think that's a lighthouse. I tell you what, they're not looking at a lighthouse, are they? It's ridiculous.
Right.
But the reality is the TV put it in a spin. The reality is Rendlesham Reform is arguably the best case in the world in terms of that it's 3 successive nights, different shifts of airmen involved, numerous military witnesses, many of which are still in those shadows, yet to come out because they see all this hoo-ha and ridicule still that persists in the media. But it's got ground trace evidence, background radiation 8 times above. It had 3 indentations in the ground, and the Geiger counter only peaked in each of the indentations, not next to it, but in the peak, and 1 blast area directly in the centre of the triangle. Now, it's not about how much it peaked; it's about the fact that there was a change. Geiger counter, take it out of the pod, go to the next pod. The indentation, that means that something materially affected the background radiation. There were trees broken, something came through and punched its way either up or down through the canopy of the trees. When Holt looked up, he could see a hole in the canopy of the trees where the objects had took off and gone off up into the sky. Numerous objects seen to the north, numerous objects seen to the south, beams being shone down into the nuclear weapons storage area. I tell you what, when we talk about Rendlesham and what Colonel Holt did mention, he mentioned something I didn't know. I knew that there were people on the ground walking around with machine guns in the weapons storage area because I'd done that job myself. So I knew that there were more witnesses, and he acknowledged that there were more witnesses. But what he actually said during that lecture, which I'd never heard ever before, and I'd love him to answer it, he said that he got statements from 2 of those people in the weapons storage area on the ground. Well, nobody's ever said that before, so that's either telling the truth or he's hiding some part of the information. If those statements are indeed have been taken, he should be releasing those ASAP, because that would add a lot more vital evidence to beams being shone down into nuclear weapons storage area.
Okay. We've got Mozzie back. He's asking a delicate question to you. Have you ever been threatened by anybody directly or indirectly to keep you quiet?
No.
No, that's the easiest one to that one.
The only thing that I got was over a period of time in the last 5 or 6 years of my police career, I started to have a lot more hassle subtly within the police force. But nobody ever said to me, don't do this, else your career is this. No.
Okay. What are your views on UFO-related subjects such as animal mutilations, chupacabra, crop patterns? They've even said that maybe Bigfoot is an extraterrestrial. It goes on to also Ghost Rider's question from earlier. What do you think about the strange noises that we hear that's worldwide? Do you think they're all connected to UFOs?
Well, that's about 8 questions in one.
Oh, I know, I know.
We'll take the first bit.
I'm trying to get them all into you, Harry.
What's under the UFO umbrella? What's definitely under the UFO umbrella is crop circles. There is a correlation, I believe. Many people have seen UFOs in relation to crop circles. Most are man-made, 95%, I believe, are man-made. But I do think there's a correlation. It's under the umbrella of UFOs. Okay. Alien implants, alien abductions, human mutilations, animal mutilations are all involved under the UFO umbrella. Definitely. Okay. What was the other questions that you asked?
Chupacabra.
Some people say that's UFOs. Maybe a creature that's been dropped off by a spaceship, or it's a escape from a spaceship, and it might just be an animal running free. I've no idea. To me, I've no knowledge to base that on. Suffice to say that I suspect that there are some very strange creatures. Bigfoot, Yeti, I think it's all part of the same thing. Right. I do personally believe that there are still yet to be found large gorilla type apes in the very remote areas of the world.
Okay, and
but I don't think they're personally ET related. But do I believe in Bigfoot and the Yeti? Yes, because the circumstantial evidence, the best bit of evidence, footprints, casts, hairs, some DNA taken from hairs of skull caps and things like that, would suggest that we're dealing with a large primate.
And the noises that we hear around the world.
This is interesting. Undoubtedly, some may think that it's hoaxes, and maybe some have been hoaxed. But there seems to be quite a lot of them over the last couple of years from all around the world. And when you hear them, they all sound strangely similar, and they are kind of very eerie. I have no idea what they are. Suffice to say that they appear to be coming from underground. And one thing that I think we don't realise is, and especially I think in America, is that we have the technology to build very proficient underground tunnels. There is a lot of technology that would say that there are major tunnelling systems for survival, nuclear war, that kind of thing, that have been developed, and machines have been developed that can bore and make vast inroads and connect, I suspect, underground, very deep, mile or 2 miles underground. There may well be connections to other cities, strategic points around the world. So if I would hazard a guess, if indeed it's real, I think it could be some kind of underground drilling.
Okay, and what when we hear a lot about greys and reptilians being part of the government, what do you think to that?
I've no idea. It sounds crazy.
It does, doesn't it?
You see what I mean? This goes into the secret world.
Yeah.
Of need to know. Now, if, for example, a UFO crashed in 1947 at Roswell, and one of the bodies that was allegedly covered survived for a time, and there was able to be some limited communication between the alien and the interrogators, then who knows that somebody'd say, well, if we help you, or if you help us, we will give you certain technology. We will give you certain things to help your civilization advance more quickly. People speculate that fiber optics, night vision, things like that came from reverse engineered things. But it may well be that they were given to us in some kind of an exchange. Well, a lot of people have speculated with animal mutilations that they put it this way, if the argument against animal mutilations being man-made is kind of ridiculous if you think about the scale. If you think that in America, huge big continent, you could seal off a mountain range and have thousands of square acres, you could shoot them every day for the next 50 years and black them to hell and do experiments to millions of cattle, and nobody would have a clue. So you could do it in total secrecy. You don't need to have any hoo-ha.
No.
Why are you going to go on somebody's farm and then take 50 of their cattle and then dump them in various places? And they've all got these surgical marks that are very similar, like laser cuts with no blood. They're very common. There's very common wounds that are recorded all around the world. Why would you do that? You could do it at Porton Down to your heart's content. You don't need to do it in this public way. So that takes me to think that they're doing this. Now, there's some speculation that certain amount of mutilations are allowed to continue as part of perhaps a genetic ongoing program that ET has, and that's why it's occurring, because they tend to go to genitalia, certain areas of the body. It may well be that that is needed. It sounds fanciful, but I suspect that that aspect is real. Whether they're in government is, I will never know, you will never know, because we don't have the need to know qualification.
Okay. What is your best evidence to date based on UFO sightings that involve extraterrestrials? Or anything?
Yeah, I mean, in 2013, I gave evidence on behalf of police officers worldwide in Washington, D.C. at what was called the Citizens' Hearings, which was mock congressional hearings just 2 blocks short of the White House at the National Press Club, the same place where all the leaders of the world have spoken, Nelson Mandela, Gorbachev, etc., all the American presidents. So I was at the same podium as that, and we're all giving our evidence before 5 former congressmen and women and 1 former senator. Together, the 6 of them had 80 years of public service. So a very experienced panel, and after 1 day of presenting our best evidence, or some of our best evidence, because it lasted for 5 full days, they stood up and they basically said, we've heard enough. Yes, you should have full congressional hearings. There clearly is ET visiting or surveilling the Earth. Now, one of the people that gave testimony was a guy called Colonel Oscar Santa Maria, and he was a Peruvian general, but he was in his earlier career, he'd been a fighter pilot. And on one occasion, he was flying a jet fighter, and in broad daylight, he was vectored to go to a radar-confirmed stationary object. This is broad daylight, and as he approached on an attacking position, as he approached this stationary object, which is very difficult for a pilot because they're not used to seeing stationary things, he immediately looked at it and thought, oh, this looks like a balloon. So he was ordered then to fire his machine guns at this, what we thought was a balloon. However, when he fired his weapons, he hit his target, but the bullets did nothing, and then the object suddenly jumped 10,000 feet in 2 or 3 seconds up into the air, straight vertical into the sky, in the blink of an eye, 10,000 feet. Not something that our planes could do. No. So he then chased it with his afterburner in broad daylight, and this is all confirmed on radar, and he goes up and he starts another attacking run, because it's stationary again at 10,000 feet. And just as he's about to fire his weapons again, guess what it does? It does another 10,000 feet instant hike vertically into the sky. Well, that's an intelligent act. And when you hear the testimony of this pilot, firsthand, given testimony to these senators and congressmen and women, they had their jaws round the floor. They were in awe. And there are many, multiple pilot cases, multiple commercial pilot cases of similar kind of events. And when you hear this testimony, you just realize that this is very real, and this is not stealth, and this is a phenomena that's intelligent, under intelligent control, and has a level of technology way beyond anything we have got. That's my best evidence.
Okay. Now, do you think that there are more sightings in America than anywhere else in the world? Because we seem to hear a lot from MUFON about they've seen this, that and the other, but not a lot from the UK, not that I've seen anyway, and from other places.
Well, I think what you've got to understand is that MUFON is doing a good job in the sense that it's a nationwide American research group that have been there now for many years.
Yeah.
And so and America obviously is a huge place, and I think UFOs are often seen in the vicinity of military installations, power stations, nuclear facilities. And America obviously has lots of those. So that might be an explanation why there's a lot of sightings there.
It's as if they're more interested in what's going on in America. The aliens.
Well, I think personally, America do hold the key. As I said, they're the most secretive government, and they know the most about it. But reality is UFOs are seen all over. But if you look at Britain, we've lost our reporting desk, so now it's fragmented, which is, I'm sure, what the MOD wanted. So I could record sightings that will come to me. Various other groups in the UK will get sightings, but who coordinates it? And that's what we've lost. And similarly, sightings occur around the world. But certain countries, if you go to Germany, they're very reluctant to ever admit they've had any UFO sightings. But only recently, somebody has put a legal action and forced the Germans to release their German documents on UFOs. So that'll be interesting when they come out. So again, I think there is very little structure worldwide. But in America, with MUFON, you have a large nationwide organisation that many people instantly think of, whereas we think of emergency 999, a lot of people will have heard of MUFON and will have a number that they can ring because there'll be one in their local area.
Right.
So we don't have that structure. And unfortunately, many of the British UFO groups that were historical no longer operating or have the same level of people involved as they once did. Okay. And there are many factors as to why that is, but I think UFOs have been seen much more. But it's down to the person to report it. Who do you report it to? You're hardly going to report it to the police if they're not interested, if they're not going to do anything with it. So therefore, your option is you report it to me or some UFO civilian group in the UK, but it's still fragmented. Okay. I think that's exactly what the MOD got, and that's the position we find in. But the sightings are happening all the time. I would suspect sightings, either a 1 in 10, 1 in 20, come forward. The vast majority don't.
The other question I'd like to ask is about the cover-up of the government authorities. Do you think they should be covering it up? Some people believe that it might scare people and all this, that and the other, but there seems to be a lot of the population that wants to know that we are being visited and believe that we are, and with the alien abductions or contactees and stuff like that.
You've got a very interesting disconnect in the media, because even when mainstream opinion polls are done anywhere in the world, certainly in America and Europe, the vast majority end up about 70 to 80% saying, when questioned, we believe that the government serve covering it up, and it's usually 60-70% believe that ET has visited the Earth. All right. Now you'd think on that there would be this real change and openness from governments to say, oh, well, if that's what they feel, perhaps we should tell the truth. But it doesn't quite work like that at all. The reality is it's about loss of power. That's why I think it's secret. America doesn't want to lose its dominant arm. I think the reality is that in the next 3 to 5 years, perhaps a South American country may put pressure on America to say, well, look, we're going to go public at government level. Our Prime Minister's going to stand up and say UFOs exist. Our Air Force says it, researched it, blah, blah, blah. Are you going to tell them world first, or are we going to? And I think there will be some pressure to bear on America. It's a very difficult thing, but sooner or later it's going to happen and the truth will come out. There definitely is secrecy, but it's American-led, and quite how and when that breaks, who knows?
Okay. Now, we mentioned in your introduction about your UFO Truth magazine, which you started when you retired. Why did you decide to fill your time with this?
Because as the years went on, and as I was doing the police database, something compelled me to do more. And there had been various printed magazines, UFO magazine, the one that I mentioned with Graham Birdsall, that ceased in 2004 when the editor died and his wife decided to pull the plug on it. There'd been various other short, limited printed magazines or subscription-based magazines, but didn't stand the test of time, over a period of time. And so as time went on, I thought, well, I feel compelled to do something. So as my interest in the subject became more and more, and I started to do public speaking and found that I could do it, not everybody can, but I found that I could do it, and I enjoyed doing media work, that I thought, well, I'm going to retire purposely early to launch an online magazine to tell the truth from an evidential point of view, what would stand up in a court of law. That's my particular bag, as it were. And so UFO Truth magazine was launched with the first issue in June of 2013. It's bi-monthly, which is every 2 months. It's 96 pages, but what makes it different is two things. It features many of the world's top UFO researchers from many countries around the world: South America, Europe, America, Britain, etc. And also, a third of all the monies that's raised through subscriptions, it's not free, the third of all monies raised through subscriptions is set aside for UFO causes.
Just a quick question that's come in. UFO London says, what does Gary think of Chris French? You may have missed something earlier. That there is no science regarding expert witnesses. Are we in danger of citing officialdom?
Chris French, I've met him twice for this morning show. Affable bloke off camera, but he was a paid skeptic, getting £500 a time. He'd done 20 some visits. He was on a regular contract with ITV. Anything psychological, ghost, anything like that, he would be there to offset ghosts, offset UFOs. That's part of the mainstream, and it's not right, but what can we do? What was the latter part of the question?
Are we in danger of citing officialdom? I don't know what he means by that.
Yeah,
what did you say in the run-up to
the
that?
official report all the time?
Are we going to come back to the official report all the time? Maybe that's what he's saying.
I think we're bogged down. Our big problem in ufology is having a level playing field, and we don't have a level playing field in the West. Certainly not in Europe, certainly not in America. And whilst the mainstream, if you think about it, there are only 5 or 6 big media corporations worldwide. If they control that media, then there's very little chance of ever us making a big indentation unless one ET decides to show themselves at an event that makes it, if they did it at the Olympics kind of thing, with all the cameras, and if it landed on the centre circle, and I think if they cut the live feed of TV, you'd still have 100,000 YouTube videos going straight on there. So I think that would be very hard to contain, a major event. That's a possibility.
According to a lot of videos, Gary, they actually did that at the London Olympics.
Steve, just finish off with your last one.
This one's probably a little bit tongue-in-cheek. If you had the chance, would you go on an alien spaceship if offered, like they did in Close Encounters?
I think, would I do a Richard Dreyfuss and leave my family alone to fend for themselves? No.
No.
Part of me would want to go, but if it was at the expense of seeing my children, grandchildren, etc., then the answer is no, I won't go.
Don't blame you.
Don't blame you.
Don't blame you. Well, thanks, Gary. It's been great having you on the show. It really has.
You're welcome.
I've been trying to get you for ages.
Well, you never asked me before, so don't be so long in asking me to come back.
I didn't know how to get hold of you.
Well, it's an amazing thing, the internet, isn't it?
It is.
Name,
when you
Skype, Gary, Heseltine. What's his Skype name? What's his email address? It comes up quite easy on Google, so I don't hide myself. So don't wait as long to have me back if you want me back.
Oh, I definitely want you back. Thank you very much for giving us your time. It's been brilliant.
You're welcome.
All right,
Take
care, my love. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.
Okay, bye, Gary.
That's it for that.
That's it for this evening.
That is it for this evening. So
I hope you enjoyed the show. And
as I say, Andy will be back next week. So we hope you've enjoyed this evening's show, and we look forward to having your company again next week. And as I say, that's good night from me.
And it's good night from her.
Until next time, all that's left to say is keep the
paranormal friendly. Night, guys.
Good night and God bless.
This is where it's at.
Hello, Harry Price here. Good evening. If there's nothing myself and everybody else enjoy here on the other side more is the sit back and relax and listen to Parasearch Radio with its paranormal news, views and reviews from across the UK and beyond. Make sure to find out more about them on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web, whatever they are, to keep up to date with all their broadcasts throughout the week. And I hope you enjoy them as much as we do over here. Hello? Is anybody there?